What is a story you have been dying to tell? So when my youngest daughter was maybe 4 years old, she and I headed to the shopping mall one afternoon. While there, I have to pee and realize I have no choice. I have to take her into the men's room with me. I go into a stall, usually reserved for people sitting down to do their business, and with my kid standing behind me, I unzip and start peeing. She edges forward to look at my equipment, which she hadn't ever seen before, and after staring at it, she points and says, "Daddy, is that your pee-pee?" I realize there's about 10 other guys in the quiet bathroom who are certainly listening, and I feel all self-conscious. I try and stay all calm and nonchalant and stuff and say, "Yes honey, that's my pee-pee." She tightens her neck and retreats a couple of inches and says, "Well, it sure is ugly." The whole room erupted in laughter. Every guy in the place was laughing his butt off, including me. I drove a commercial submarine when I was 13. There were almost 100 tourists on board. At that time I had never even driven a car. One of my proudest achievements. Never relevant in conversation. Till there are commercial submarines. A couple of months ago, my boyfriend and I were buying groceries. He stopped to look at a glass bottle of something, and it ended up slipping from his hands, and he thought to stick out his leg so it could cushion the fall or something like that. I took a step back at this exact moment, not realizing he dropped anything. We freaking caught the bottle between our legs and just stood there, mouths agape at one another. I don't even think we could recreate that situation if we needed to. I work at a school underprivileged children. A student's mom was in a custody battle with CPS and grandma and her. I had been aware the student's mother was having her trial with the child services. One day she comes to visit class, which is allowed. She asks to hold her 5-year-old son. She scoops him up and rushes to the door. Turns out she lost her battle with the courts and tried to steal her son she just lost custody of. I abandon my class and rush after her. After hitting me and scratching, I manage to remove her son, run inside, lock doors until cops arrive, save the kid. Dang, you'd think the people who gained custody would give enough fricks to tell the school. My pregnant and overdue wife was having strong contractions, so we dropped off our 3-year-old daughter at our babysitter's house on our way to the hospital. We met our midwife there, and after an exam, we were told my wife wasn't quite ready to deliver. So our midwife told my wife to head home, have a warm bath, and call her in the morning. Didn't look like it was going to happen that night. We thought, damn it, false alarm. So we decided to pick up our daughter from the babysitters on our way home. I put our daughter to bed and my wife poured a bath. My wife wanted privacy, so I sat in the living room down the hall. Her groans were getting progressively stronger. I had bookmarked a website I found a week or so before about how to home deliver a baby, just in case. My wife was a week late, so I quickly grabbed the laptop for a refresher. My wife finished her bath, so I handed her a towel, and just like that, her water broke all over the bathroom floor. She kept groaning and then said she felt like she had to push. I was on my hands and knees with a towel cleaning when I looked up and saw the wrinkly head of my daughter. My wife asks, "Am I crowning?" and I nervously say, "Oh no, not at all. Maybe you should go lay down. Be there in a minute." So I quickly called our midwife and told her she better come over. I grabbed a bunch of towels from the closet and ran to our bedroom. She was already pushing, so I laid the towels out around the delivery area, held her hand, and told her we could do this. Amazingly, after about 5 pushes, my daughter's head started coming out. After adjusting her shoulder to stop her from tearing out of there, she slid into my arms. With the umbilical cord still attached, I put her on her mom's chest and covered her with the remaining clean towels. A few minutes later our midwife arrived, and I got to cut the umbilical cord right there in our bedroom. We filled out a bunch of paperwork, weighed my daughter, and she gave us some pointers, and then she left for the night. It all worked out. My daughter is 2.5 years old and she is a perfectly healthy, beautiful little girl. Happy Mother's Day to my amazing wife and to all the moms out there. How the frick is this a story you never get to tell? You know god dang well you yell it constantly. My friend, who I'll call Stan, and I were driving around in what happened to be the same night as prom. He gets pulled over for speeding like the 3rd time that month, so he's pretty fricked if he gets a ticket. The cop gets to the car and asks for license, registration, and proof of insurance. All Stan has is his license, and the glove box is foo. LL of firecrackers, so if he even opens it to look, we're fricked. So he's making up some balls to the cop about why he doesn't have his registration when suddenly the cop Halls asks him, "Are you headed to prom?" Stan tells him that yes, of course we are. The cop asks, "Oh yeah, well then where's your date?" At that point Stan reaches over, pats my thigh and says lovingly, "This man right here's my date." The officer gets this dreamy look in his eyes and says, "You know, I'm gonna let you boys go. You have a great night at prom. I never got to go to mine," and walks back to his cruiser and drives away. TLDR. And that's the way my buddy got out of ticket by implying I was his gay lover. I never got to go to mine. I imagine the cop being gay had something to do with him missing prom. I hope I'm not too late for people to see this. My late grandfather told me this story about his honeymoon with my grandmother in the 1940s. My grandparents lived their entire lives in Brooklyn, NY, from birth until retirement. As the children of Italian immigrants, they were not particularly wealthy, so they spent their honeymoon on the neighboring island of Manhattan. One night, while on a leisurely stroll about the city, some jackass runs smack into them, knocking my grandmother into the street. After helping his wife to her feet, my grandfather rounded on the interloper, grabbed him by the collar, and lifted him off the ground. As my grandfather brought his fist back break the man's nose, he recognized the gentleman he was holding. It was Frank Sinatra. The Frank Sinatra, all blue eyes, the chairman of the board. It was then that my grandfather looked over his shoulder and saw a mob of screaming young women running their way. Now fully comprehending the situation, my grandfather said, "Look where you're going next time, will you?" The man nodded as my grandfather let go of him and with a slight shove shouted, "Run, Frank, run!" And with that, the leader of the Rat Pack ran off into night as the gaggle of rabid fans followed him. TLDR. Grandma and grandpa run into a celebrity. TLDR. A celebrity ran into grandma and grandpa. FTFYD. I worked in customer service, on the phone for a prominent sports company. There were about 8 of us, pretty close knit, and I was new to the company, so not as close to everyone. I walk into work and it's the first day of the year and it was like my second month in. A couple of people get laid off and one was the guy who was inside sales who had this goldfish that was like 2 years old. Apparently, everyone was given a goldfish a couple of years back and this guy kept it alive for quite some time. Impressive to say the least. He was always changing the water and feeding this thing like it was a dog. So, being new, everyone was like, "Give the fish to the new guy." I wasn't too happy because it was one more dang thing that I had to worry about. So they put it on my desk and I went to break. I come back and the fish is dead. For the 2.5 hellish years I was there, my nickname became Killer. It was pretty ironic that he get laid off and his fish died the same day. I saw the guy ran up to a girl from her behind. The guy thought that was his girlfriend, so he grabbed her butt and tried to kiss her. The girl was freaked out and pepper sprayed him. His real girlfriend was behind watching the whole thing from a distance and called him a dumbass. Same thing happened to me in Vegas. Drunk me walks over to a roulette table and grabs my wife's boobies from behind and kissed her neck. Turns out it was her sister who was standing right next to my wife. They really do look very similar from behind. They both took it cool and laughed, as did everyone else on the table. I won't ever hear the end of it though. So, about a year ago, my friends and I went to go see the second Insidious. It was just us 4 guys and we took up the whole row. And since it was the opening night, the entire theater got filled. The climax of the movie, the lights go on and everyone groans. Usher comes down and grabs our rows and pulls us out. We were wondering why. We weren't particularly loud. He explains, "We had a complaint that you, a boy with green hair," points at me, "was fingering his girlfriend in the theater." I look at my friends. No, turns out, there was another boy with green hair, fingering his girlfriend. Haha, I read that as the musician's Usher. Finally a chance to post this. At my local video rental shop, there is a Gumball machine with maybe 5 or 6 different colored Gumball types. Sticky taped to the delicious glass Gumball globe is a sign that reads, "Guess the color that comes out of the Gumball machine and win a free weekly rental voucher 20C. With those odds, They were just asking to be exploited. So, 12-year-old me devised a devious plan. I went to some of the shops across the road and traded $15 for a colossal fuckton of 20c coins. Just did the math. About 75 20-cent pieces. When the employee lady saw me scuffling into the store with my shirt stomach filled with silver coins, man was she pee. This may have been because she now had to spot my 75 guesses. I have no idea why she didn't just kick me out then and there. In short, the next 20 minutes consisted of the shop lady watching me individually slot each coin into the machine. She had a pile of vouchers in hand, dishing one out onto the rapidly growing pile every few guesses. I wasn't a dong about it. I paused my gumball endeavor if another customer was there, but she breathed a sigh of relief when I put the 75th gumball in my backpack. In total, I pocketed 18 vouchers, $126 total value for $15. I took my fat stack of vouchers, shoved them in my pocket, and with my candy-filled backpack, I ran home. I'll never forget the sound of 75 gumballs shaking around on my back. It was the sound of an afternoon of accomplishment. TLDR. When I was 12, I single-handedly took down video rental stores. You then need to sell gumballs at school for a 50% markup. My 7th grade team, the group of teachers we all had, put together an elaborate detention suspension policy. 2 missed homeworks meant losing your lunch period, a lunch detention. 3 was an automatic detention and a demerit. 5 demerits meant an in-school suspension. 10 meant an out-of-school one. My math teacher, whom I generally liked, but later realized wasn't a very good math teacher, had a bug up her butt about tuna. Yes, tuna. This was when tuna companies were grabbing dolphins in their nets and it was a big deal in the press, and she was on the warpath. She gave you a warning for bringing tuna sandwiches into school, even though the cafeteria sold it, and 2 warnings equaled a detention. That never happened, because she probably couldn't give a detention for that, but it scared us and got you on her crap list. One day, this kid Josh has a lunch detention with this teacher and brought a tuna sandwich that day. She gives him a warning, or so the story goes. None of us were there. Later that day, he's in class and his homework isn't done, so that should be an automatic detention. But he's working to finish it while she's going around talking to the rest of us. She notices, of course, and says something to the effect of your homework better be done before I get to you or you're going to be suspended. It seemed like she was giving him a 5-minute grace period to finish up, but that's not how he saw it. He goes to correct her. You mean detention, not suspension. Figuring she misspoke. After all, a suspension is a much bigger deal, and the rules don't call for that at all. He says no, suspension, and brings up the tuna sandwich. He flips out, saying that she can't do that, and she says as long as you're in my classroom, you obey my rules or something to that effect. So he yells then I'm leaving your classroom and jumps out the window. He was suspended for 3 days. You mean he got detention? I was on my way to class in NYC and this homeless guy approached me. He had a trench coat on and he started to reach for something in his coat. I honestly thought he was going to flash me, so I was freaking out, but then of course, the unexpected. He pulled out a pigeon and tried handing it to me while yelling, "Merry Christmas." Note, it was only October during this time. It's a Home Alone reference. Lost in New York. Get with it. Our 70-year-old teacher told everyone that he was sick and multiple faculty vouched for how sick he looked. Our drama class, he taught drama, was worried since he looks on the verge of death, especially for a 70-year-old. Since it was one of the last days of school and we often went to Starbucks during class as kind of a tradition, we went to Starbucks on the second day he was gone. We walked in and lo and behold, our drama teacher is completely fine and in Starbucks. He sees us, has an oh crap look, and says we'll talk about this next week. He missed the rest of the week, which was this week, and we'll find out the story Monday. It's gonna be an interesting drama class on Monday now. And that, kids, is what we call acting. This is a pretty sweet story, so I never get to tell it to people. It would show them how nice I can be. Anyway, I was working in activities in a nursing home when I was younger and had this couple who I adored. The husband didn't need to be there, but he was because he wanted to be with his wife. Oh man, did he have a mouth on him. Another reason why I love that couple. We would always chat and they would tell me their stories while I was doing the wife's nails. Well, then the wife took a turn for the worse, and she was getting really bad, but she got to see her last birthday. I went to go visit them and bring him his dinner on her birthday, and he made a joke, hey, since it's her birthday and she can't eat, can I have her steak dinner? I giggled it off and apologized for the crap dinner I was bringing to him. Then I decided, hey, why not, so I left work and went to Texas Roadhouse and got him a steak dinner. He was really surprised. He was just joking. A few days later she died, and then he left the facility. They were such an adorable and cute couple. That's a really great thing you did for a person who was going through something difficult. Well done, Swallyman. My married, obese, 80-year-old grandmother tries to catfish men online for fake online gambling money, as in games where it is 100% virtual money, no actual cash input. She thinks no one knows. She has a profile picture of this skinny big busted 20-something girl, and she gets phone calls from a few guys she's trying to suck her in. But she sneaks off so her conversations are private and tries to say they're just friends and gets defensive about it. However, she's actually horrible with technology, and at one point she got a new laptop and a family member was helping her to set it up. She had a messaging service in the background and one of her friends messaged her. Well, apparently she hit something on accident and triggered the webcam. She didn't realize what happened, but the relative who was helping her didn't quickly covered the webcam, because none of us want to get in the middle of her awkward and drama. But not before her guy friend started sending messaging asking what the heck just showed up on his screen and what was going on. We never found out exactly how it went, but we believe she light covered up the situation to say whatever he saw wasn't her. I got to help out the local PD with active shooter training. After Columbine, many local PDs started training their officers to be quasi-SWAT when responding to an active shooter. Since people weren't happy that the Colorado police just waited outside Columbine for SWAT to show up while the shooters continued to shoot kids. My brother was taking criminal justice classes at the time, and his CJ fraternity was asked to assist with a round of training. They were going to be doing the training exercises in our high school and wanted volunteers to play victims, terrified students, to make the simulation seem more real. Being the annoying little sister TMI, of course asked if I could tag along, and was told I could. They ran the training exercises for about 4 hours a day for 5 days. This was during the summer, and it was a blast. At first they just had us play victims, lying on the ground and grabbing at the officers' ankles as they passed, or running screaming from classrooms as they cleared the halls. A couple of my friends also tagged along the second day and made it even more fun. One thing I remember very clearly was my female friend lying on the floor, dead, and when the 4 cops on that particular simulation came around the corner, I ran towards them screaming, "Oh my god, they shot my girlfriend. I am also female." The officer on point stopped, lowered his weapon, and said, "What?" On the final day, for some reason I was the only volunteer who showed up. They couldn't very easily have only one person playing victim, so the trainers told me I could play the part of the shooter for that day's exercises. Sweet, I got to spend the afternoon running through my old high school, shooting at cops with an airsoft AR-15 and not getting in trouble for it. The very best part, though, was at the end of one particular training run. There were about 24 cops going through the training each day, but only 4 went through the simulation at a time, so the rest just hung around at the staging area waiting their turn. As we came back to the staging area, one of the cops who was waiting asked me if they'd shot me. I said yeah, they shot me in the butt. Who shoots someone in the butt? The cop chuckled and drawled, "Wheel. They do train us to aim for the largest part of a person." The other cop started laughing, and I just gave him my best unimpressed face and counted, "Well then, I guess you'll never ever have to worry about anyone aiming between your legs, will you?" The other cops lost their crap, howling with laughter, loss of everyone, and pointing at the cop who teased me, who only managed a weak hey in return. The one female cop who was there literally fell off her chair laughing. It was one of my proudest moments. Overwritten. One day, the day before Christmas about 5 years ago, I think, I called up my buddy to meet up with him at the mall for some very last minute shopping. I get there before he does and was playing some Tetris on my phone when this old man in an electric wheelchair start rolling towards me. He had been rolling around asking people around the mall entrance for help, but couldn't figure out with what exactly just from overhearing and playing my game. I assumed he wanted some change the way he was asking and the way people were denying him. I was in a good mood and prepared to get out my wallet when he hit me with, "Hey buddy, could you help me out with something?" I paused and started to nod when he continued with, "I usually don't ask around but it's important." I said, "Sure man, what's up?" He told me how he needed to take his medication right away and how he wasn't able to use his arms. At the end of that explanation, I wasn't really sure how to feel. It was so completely out of the blue, but I agreed without really knowing what giving him his medication would entail, because, again, I was feeling good and it looked like this guy really needed someone to help him out. He tells me, "Yay, can you unzip my bag?" He had an old backpack hanging from the side of his chair. "Could you get the pill bottle from the inside? It's somewhere down there." I proceeded to look through all the junk in there and finally found it. "And I need the water bottle too." He seemed very embarrassed at this point and I tried everything to not make him like he was asking for too much. This was followed with, "Yay, I need to. Could you put one between my lips?" which I promptly and carefully did. The thought that this was some hidden camera show flashed through my mind for a second. "And could you help me wash it down?" I twisted off the cap and bottle, fed this man with a few onlook as I felt watching the whole ordeal since it was obvious I didn't know this man. Did the same routine with the second one. At the end of it I put everything back in his bag and he looked me in the eye, gave me the most sincere "Hey, thank you." With that he rolled away. I was so completely humbled that I didn't know what to say or think for a while. A piece of real life hit me hard. I always think of that experience when I'm reminded to not take anything for granted. And I'll always remember that. Thank you. Many years ago I was eating breakfast before school, somewhere between 3rd 6th grade. Just sitting there lazily, not fully awake, saw a fly sitting on the top of my book bag. Pick up a pencil and threw it at the fly, split him right in half. No one ever believes me, and I doubt anyone ever will, but it totally did happen. Back in middle school, I had the reputation as one of the best artists in school. Don't look in my history, I have not improved, as standards at the school went. I was also a decently popular kid as well and lots of secrets were trusted with me. So, naturally, my friend, we'll call him John, and I were talking one day, and it gets to the topic of girls, seeing how we're guys. I take my turn. I had a girlfriend. That's about all I had to say, but he told me he had a crush. After asking about this crush repeatedly, he finally tells me who it is. Nice girl named Mary. Usually, this is where the topic of conversation should stop, but he goes on for a half an hour how madly in love he is with Mary, how he constantly thinks about her, how he needs her to get through the day, and more dramatic things. It was clear John was stalkerishly obsessed with her. A few days pass by, and I pay no mind with this information. But John comes up to me, asking for a drawing request. I couldn't say no, I was too kind. So he asked me to draw a portrait of Mary. But for what reason? I didn't know, but before I could ask or object, he hands me a crumpled picture of Mary from his pocket and walks on to his next class. Why did he need a draw picture of her when he had a real picture of her? Anyway, I get to work on it after school. Hours were put into this thing, and it really dragged on because I had to continuously hide it from my mother. The portrait became quite the masterpiece, for me at least. I showed it to John the next day, and in his words, "It's so gorgeous." Nervously, I handed it to him quickly and got away for him. I didn't plan on taking requests from this guy in a long time. So, content was his sketch. John starts showing it to people, and of course, tells the artist was me. And eventually, a random kid takes the sketch and runs across the room with it. Who does he bring it to? Of course, it's Mary. He didn't have the intention of embarrassing John or even me. He just seemed like he thought it was worth sharing. Excitedly, he explains how skillfully I drew this picture of her. I watched John sink in the corner. Luckily, nothing was said about him. I looked back at Mary, and her face had pure bewilderment in it. I think she was going to say something, but slowly just shook my head. as if that would successfully deny whatever the random kid had told her. Now, I went into a session of panic, so I did whatever seemed logical at the time. I walked up to Mary and the random kid, snatched my sketch, and all I needed to do was to dispose of it, so no one could see it again. Of course, it seemed rational to eat the drawing right in front of everyone. It took a while, but soon, there was no drawing to look at. I thought it was worth it. What? Man, I am always late to these kind of threads. Oh well, here is the short version. I was flying standby going from Honolulu to Atlanta just before Christmas 12/19, so flights were full. The lady sitting next to me at the gate apparently knew some of the flight attendants and they seemed worried she wouldn't make it on the flight. She was also flying standby, but she was convinced her and her 12-year-old daughter were going to make it. Later, I got the second to last seat on the plane, and while leaving to board, I hear that lady realize that there is only one seat left and her daughter would have to be split. She explained that she could not do that, so I offered her my seat so they could go together. That's when the waterworks started. The lady began to cry, saying thank you repeatedly. It turns out the little girl's father is very sick and they needed to be there. I gave the woman and her daughter a hug before they boarded the plane, and she told me to tell my parents that they raised a good son. I missed so many flights. I spent over 27 hours waiting at 3 different airports along the west coast. 2.5 days later I finally made it home to Atlanta. Mid-March, I hear a knock at the door to find a neighbor who lives on the street right above me. It was this black girl named Rebecca, and she asked me if she can borrow my phone to call her father because she stormed out of house for some reason, and as she came back, the door was locked. As she called him, I ran to the restroom, and as I came out, I saw her tearing up, telling me her dad yelled at her and wouldn't come back to open the door. It was really breezy outside, so I decided to let her in. We talked a couple minutes while watching some TV, and she told me she liked me, but I rejected her because I thought she was insanely unattractive. After that, it got kinda awkward until her dad called my phone. He told her to come back home immediately, so I felt like being nice and walked her back. As we walked towards her house, the cops were there about to arrest her. She apparently gave her sister bruises by beating her up because her sister took the last soda. The policeman asked me if I was dating her and I immediately said no. They told me to walk away and I never turned back. A girl named Rebecca who's black. Well, now I have Friday stuck in my head. I used to work the phones for the college I went to as part of a student worker loan for the admissions office. I got a call from a girl who was on her way out to the school as she spoke to me. She sounded really excited, was asking me all kinds of questions about the school. I told her she is going to love it, and then we hung up. I found out 2 days later that her father had called the following day to cancel her arrangements with the school. Her daughter had gotten into an accident and had died. I was most likely the last person to talk to her. I still think of her from time to time. While in Seattle for Comic Con this year, me and my 2 friends were walking to the convention center. A homeless man stopped us and asked if we had any spare change. I saw across the street and there just so happened to be a Subway across the street. I was feeling very kind that day and kind of just wanted to give a little. So I asked him if he would like to walk across the street with me and get a sandwich. He looked at me with an amazed look on his face like he didn't believe me. So I told him to come on and started crossing the street. He followed me and my friends into the Subway and I brought him up to the counter. I told him he could have whatever he wanted, so he ordered a 6 inches sub and a medium drink. I could tell he was hungry, so I told the cashier, make that a 12 sub and a large drink. So when he got his food I walked him over to a table. He couldn't seem to stop thanking me. I offered him a hug. I like hugging people, and told him to enjoy his food. He started crying and thanking me again. TLDR. Sometimes just a meal to one person can be something worth crying tears of joy over to another. Around 12 years ago I went to Beijing for a school trip. Throughout the trip we'd got used to people taking our picture or asking to have their picture with us. Light blonde hair and blue eyes made me stick out quite a bit from the crowd. One day involved a trip to the Great Wall. The picture taking ramped up and I started to be invited into family photos. Me in the middle surrounded by a Chinese family on their trip to the Great Wall. I must have been in a dozen family photos. Fast forward 12 years and my mate from uni has moved out to Shanghai and is marrying a Chinese girl. I fly out and the day before the wedding there is a reception kinda thing for everyone to meet. I'm chatting away but I see the bride's grandmother then her parents looking over at me, talking then walking out the room. I ask the bride what is the matter. I don't want to have offended them so she goes to find out. She comes back with the whole family with a picture of me standing in the middle of the family 12 years ago on the Great Wall. Over a billion people, thousands of miles apart and my mate ends up marrying a girl I'd met years before. TLDR. Chinese coincidences. I just remembered about this one recently, but I haven't had any reason to tell it. One night, when I was 17 years old I was crashing on the couch of my friend's brother's apartment, which was on the 4th floor of 5-story building that his parents owned. They had both gone to bed, but I often have trouble sleeping, so I was wide awake. I lay on the couch, with my back elevated by the armrest and looked out the window as I listened to music on my headphones. It was around 2 or 3 AM, so the street in front of their building was pretty much empty. Even though during the day it's a busy street, it would get an occasional car every once in a while and people waiting for getting off of the bus, which ran 24/7. I closed my eyes for a few minutes to focus on the music and hope that I would be able to fall asleep, but I couldn't. When I opened them I looked out towards the street again and I saw two men. One was behind the other with his arm wrapping up around his body up to his neck. His other hand was doing something behind the other man that I couldn't see. They were kind of shuffling a bit and the one that was behind had his head rested on the shoulder of the other, facing his ear, as if he was whispering something. His other. At first I thought they were a couple, embracing as they waited for the bus, but then it hit me, that guy is getting robbed at knife point. Almost immediately after I figured it out, the mugger pushed the other guy out into the street and started running and turned the corner out of my sight. The victim lost his balance and fell, but luckily there were no oncoming cars. I watched as he picked himself up and paced back and forth, still very visibly shaken by what had happened. Another man appeared from around the corner and walked up to him. I could tell that he was explaining what had happened and pointed to the direction where the mugger went. Afterwards, he pulled out a cell phone and started running back in the direction of the mugger, the victim slowly following him. I think the other guy walked past the mugger and thought it was suspicious of him to be running and went to see what had happened. He was a pretty big guy and looked like he could have been gang affiliated, but I'll never know if he was or if they were even able to catch the guy. It was the first time I had ever seen anything like that happen, and what made it surreal was seeing it happen like that, because no one knew I was watching, since I was 30 feet above them looking out a window. My dad used to play soccer just for fun in an adult league. One of his buddies on the team had a birth defect, so he pretty much has crab claws instead of normal hands. 2 giant fingers. He played goalie for the team. The only guy who can use his hands in soccer was the guy with fricked up hands. Also the only position that moves primarily from side to side rather than forwards and back. I saw a girl about to trip and fall into oncoming traffic in Chicago while I was in a coffee shop. Some random dude on the street caught her before the unimaginable happened. They both came into the coffee shop and started talking as I left the shop. 2 years later I see them walking on the street holding hands with wedding rings on their fingers. When I first came to the United States, almost 3 years ago, everybody told me that I was not going to make it, that I was too old to learn the language, 20, and that I was destined to do manual labor like every other immigrant. Fast forward to present day, I'm very close to get my associates yet, not super fancy, but to me it means something. My English is somewhat decent. I have my own car and I debt free. So frick everybody that told me that I was not going to make it. Yet, I had to get it off my chest. Your story had better English than most of what you see on Reddit from native speakers. Congrats. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.